Let's bring in MS Now Capitol Hill reporter Kevin Fry, former Undersecretary of State for Diplomacy and Public Affairs in the Obama administration, Rick Stengel, and former Executive Director of the New York State Democratic Party, Basil Smikle. Rick and Basil are MS Now political analysts. Kevin, the House Democrats bill has, I think, an even tighter refund timeline. So I guess, when should consumers expect their refunds?
Well, that is the key question, and it's hard to see where the path is to that, because keep in mind, as you mentioned, the House has their own bill. It's pushing for a 90-day deadline, provided the bill gets signed into law, for the Customs and Border Protection to send this money out to businesses and then distribute, perhaps. Senate is pushing for 180 days. But keep in mind, the Senate bill only basically says it is the sense of the Senate. This is a non-binding suggestion. It is the sense of the Senate that those businesses should then pass on the savings from the reimbursed tariffs to consumers and small businesses. So by no means is this dictated in law. But obviously, this comes as Democrats have been pounding the pavement here on Capitol Hill and out in the public, making affordability a central tenet of their midterm message. And you imagine this fits in quite nicely with that. Now, one thing to keep an eye on here is on the House bill, that 90-day deadline bill. The lead sponsor of that legislation, his team tells me that they are looking at potentially pursuing a discharge petition to try to force a vote on the House floor on that if they're not able to get a commitment from the House GOP leadership to do so. Of course, Democrats have successfully deployed discharge petitions where they go around House leadership to force action on, for example, the Epstein files, on extending ACA subsidies. So could this be the next next domino to fall? We do know there are a handful of Republicans in the House who are very publicly celebrating the Supreme Court ruling. Think of Thomas Massie, think of Don Bacon, saying that this reaffirms that Congress has a role to play in tariff policy. The question is then, would then they join on to try to force a vote on this? That's one of the dynamics to keep an eye on in the coming weeks on this.
Yeah, let's, Basil, talk about what Kevin calls the midterm messaging. There's a new Washington Post poll, which was in the field, I should say, before the Supreme Court decision, but it found that 64% of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of tariffs. Does that lopsided number give Democrats an opening to maybe even sway Republicans to join them on this tariff refund bill?
Yeah, I do think it gives them an opening. Republicans, let's be clear, Republicans are still largely lockstep with the president, but there is some opportunity there with independents. And if you look at that poll, there is disapproval on the economy overall and also disapproval on specific elements of the economy, tariffs included in that. The president said during 2025 that he was going to get Americans a refund. Congress can do this if they want. So even if there is a difficult off-ramp for Democrats in trying to force Republicans' hand, one thing they have been really good at is calling attention to these issues, calling attention to the inconsistencies in the president's and Republican leadership's comments to voters about the economy, particularly around, as we saw, healthcare and affordability. So I definitely think there's an opportunity for Democrats here.
Well, Rick, Republican Congressman Don Bacon posted this on X, quote, President Trump obviously didn't read the Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch's majority ruling on tariffs. Congress has the authority over tariffs, but the president says no, writing on Truth Social. I do not have to go back to Congress to get approval of tariffs. It has already been gotten in many forms a long time ago, exclamation point. They were also just reaffirmed by the ridiculous and poorly crafted Supreme Court decision. Look what Congressman Bacon has opposed the president before, but where does all this leave us, Rick?
Well, it's a good question. And of course, Chris, as you know, Article 1 of the Constitution says only Congress has the power to lay and collect taxes. Couldn't be clearer, and that was part of the Supreme Court decision. I think it leaves us. I think the Democrats are playing the politics of this smartly. I'm not sure any bill about refund is going to pass through the House and probably not the Senate. The irony, of course, is that the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump a get out of jail free policy. He could go, look, yeah, I have to abide by the Supreme Court, and he could get rid of an incredibly unpopular policy. Even this legislation, in a way, gives Trump an opportunity because he could start mailing checks to the American people that would get there in time for the midterms. Again, that's not going to happen. The Democrats are doing it smartly. it's always the economy. The American people don't care so much about the constitutionality of the decision of the Supreme Court. They care about the economy, and they feel like the Supreme Court is on their side, saying that tariffs are a bad policy. They were a good policy once in the 19th century. They're a bad policy now.
Well, in fact, Basil, if you go back to that poll that I just mentioned, the worst issue for the president is inflation. Hands down,
Right.
Worst issue for the president is inflation. Not that the Democrats are doing so great in that poll, but the president's looking very poor. And tomorrow night, he does have a chance. It's called the State of the Union. Tens of millions of people generally watch it. So is it an opening for him, an opportunity for him?
Well, for a typical president, yes, it would be an opportunity for that president to be able to lay out a vision, talk about the record, lay out a vision, try to assuage the concerns of the voters, particularly the base, that the country is and going in the right direction and that he will steer it in the right direction. But we know this president doesn't stick to messaging that very well. And I expect it to be a very long rant about his policies that are going to go into a whole lot of other areas outside of the economy. But I think ultimately what's going to happen coming out of the State of Union, certainly after this SCOTUS decision, is continued chaos, continued uncertainty, and small business owners are going to continue to have a really difficult time. I imagine that the big businesses can absorb tariffs for a period of time, but small businesses are going to struggle. And that I doubt that very much that there's going to be a specific message to them.
I think there's going to be a focused message, and we're told it's going to be about affordability, Rick, from Abigail Spanberger. She, of course, is the governor of Virginia, who's going to give the Democratic response. That response often gets fewer viewers than the president's does, but is that an opportunity for her and for that Democratic messaging?
Of course, it's an opportunity, Chris. You know, I hope she does a great job. That's always one of the most thankless jobs that it's possible to have.
Completely thankless. Yep.
Yes, completely thankless. But to go back to Basil's point, and he understands polls a lot better than I do, it's always dangerous to tell voters something is true when they know it's not true. The thing that voters know better than anything else is they know the circumstances of their own lives. If you're telling them this is the greatest economy in history, you know, we've never had so many jobs, everybody is thriving, they go, well, I don't know, I'm not, you know, and I'm looking at the price of eggs and maybe inflation has come down a little, but I feel it. So I think that there's going to be a disjunction between what Trump is saying at the State of the Union and how voters feel. And by the way, this is what happened when he was president the first time. He kept telling people that things were the way they were, and people would go, no, they're not. And he became a historically unpopular president. He's on the road to that again now.
Kevin, we mentioned this earlier. The president often does not, almost always doesn't stick to script. But it is a tradition that maybe behind the scenes, leaders in Congress will suggest to the White House the things that they would like to hear from the president or the ways in which he might set them up for what is looking to be a very difficult midterms for them. What do we know about those conversations, or any hopes or lack of hopes that the Republicans might have for the State of the Union?
Well, to hit on what was just said, I mean, the Democrats want him to basically tie himself into knots during this speech, but the Republicans certainly would like him to tout that so-called one big beautiful bill, that reconciliation package that is essentially the cornerstone, their biggest legislative accomplishment from the first year, and tout the idea of tax cuts that were included there, especially as we are now in tax filing season. Whether or not he will stick to that message is the big question. And of course, there is a chance that he also goes sideways because members of the Supreme Court are going to be right in front of him. And he is clearly very angry about this tariff ruling, and he has not shied away from taking it out on members of the Supreme Court.
Kevin Fry, Rick Stengel, Basil Smikle, thank you all.